you will be using on the CELTA course. On the first page, you will have some important information about the lesson you are to teach. This is how you have to fill it out. First of all, you have to write your name, for instance, John Smith. Then, you have to write the name of the tutor who will be observing your lesson on the day, for instance, Enrique Moura. Right after that, you have to write the level of the lesson, say intermediate, the expected number of students, which you can find on the attendance list, the number of the lesson you are to teach, for instance, lesson 2, the length of the lesson, your lessons will always be 45 minutes, the date of the lesson, the time the lesson will start, and the time the lesson will finish. You will know this based on the fact that if you're first, second, or third on the day, your tutor will let you know that. Then, you have to check the kind of lesson you're going to teach. For instance, if it's a reading lesson, check an X. If it's a Lexis lesson, you check an X here. Then you have to write the lesson aim of the lesson. Say, this is a reading lesson. So, by the end of this lesson, students will be better able to read an article about technology for gist and detail. Then, you have to write the subsidiary aims of the lesson. For instance, to revise vocabulary about technology, to discuss the importance of technology nowadays. The next thing you'll have to do is write your personal aim. What is it that you hope to achieve in the lesson? This usually comes in your previous lesson, so whenever your tutor points out what your development needs are, you can choose one of the development needs and write them down here. For instance, to improve my instructions. And then here you have to write the materials of the lesson. Copies of the text, copies of the worksheets, and flashcards. For instance, the thing you will do is analyze the language of the lesson. Here you have 3 different pages. The first one says, Analysis of target language for language lessons. You're going to use this if you're teaching grammar, lexis, phonology, or functions. Then, moving down, you have Analysis of target language for receptive skill lessons. You're going to use this if you're teaching reading or listening. And then, last but not least, we have Analysis of target language for productive skill lessons. And you're going to use this if you're teaching speaking or writing. So, depending on the kind of lesson you're teaching, you will have to complete a different section of the lesson plan. Let's say you're teaching lexis. The words you're going to teach are, say, animals. So, horse, dog, cat. In this section of the lesson plan, you have to write about the form of the word. So you can consider these things here: marker sentences, part of speech, grammatical information, collocations. So for instance, a marker sentence with horse would be, I don't know how to ride a horse. Of course, the marker sentences have to be related to the target of the lesson. Part of speech, horse is a noun. Grammatical information. In this case, there isn't much to say because we aren't analyzing any structure. Collocations wouldn't be much relevant here, but we can have things like ride a horse, And then the same thing happens with dog. Have a look at the examples of language analysis sheets that you will receive with the email containing this video. Uh, the next column, you have meaning and elicitation questions. So here what you have to do is complete with the information that you can find in the dictionary or in the grammar book in the case of grammar. So if we are looking for the word horse in the dictionary, what we find is, let me copy and paste this. A solid, there we go, a solid hoofed plant-eating domesticated mammal with the flowing mane and tail used for riding, racing, and to carry and pull loads. So this is what a horse means. This is the definition of horse. Then we have to think about how we will check understanding. It's a good idea to write a few CCQs here, and it's always important to write at least 3 CCQs. So here, if we have a look at the definition, it says it's a solid hoofed plant-eating domesticated mammal. We can say, is a horse a domesticated animal? That's a CCQ. Is a horse a mammal? That's another CCQ. Does a horse have a tail? That's another possible CCQ. Do we use a horse for riding? That's another possible CCQ. Do we use a horse to carry loads? And that's another possible CCQ. In terms of pronunciation, what you have to do is write the phonetic transcription of the word. So, in the case of horse, here we have it, horse. If you're analyzing grammar, you have to do other things apart from transcribing the word. You need to transcribe the whole marker sentence. You need to think about which words in the sentence should be stressed. You need to think about connected speech, and you need to think about intonation. As we are analyzing a word in isolation, the transcription of the word is sufficient. Then, up next, we have to think about anticipated difficulties and solutions with each of the items. So, in the case of horse, you may think that students might misspell horse as horse or horse. This is the problem. If this happens, we need to think of a solution. The solution will be write the correct spelling on the board. Remember that here you need to think of specific problems. You cannot write things like, the students will not know the word, because this is not a problem. If students don't know the word, you teach it. The problem is when students misunderstand or misuse the word. In terms of meaning, well, I don't think students will have any problems with meaning, so you have to justify that here. I don't believe students will have any problems with meaning because I will use pictures to present the language. And then we need to think about problems with pronunciation. So, students might pronounce horse as. For instance, horse. And then if this happens, I will drill. You don't have to come up with one problem and solution only. You may think about more than one problem for the same item, especially if you're thinking about grammar. Then, for the analysis of target language for receptive skills and for predictive skills, please refer to the examples you will receive by email. Lesson plan is where you write the stages and procedures of the lesson. Supposing this is a vocabulary lesson, my stages will be leading, vocabulary task, language clarification, control practice, and freer practice. You can delete the other items you won't need. So what is the purpose of the leading? Look, here you have to write what the stage and purpose of the stages are. It is to set the context of the lesson. The aim of the vocabulary test is to gauge how much of the language students already know. The aim of language clarification would be to highlight features of meaning, form, and pronunciation of the target's language, etc., etc., etc. So you have to do this for all of the stages. So let's say that for the leading, I'm going to play a memory game with the students. So here I have to first describe the activity in detail. For instance, memory game. Distribute pictures of animals. Distribute pairs of pictures of animals facing down and set instructions for the memory game. Let students play in pairs. Monitor and help if necessary. Then the next thing you have to do is script your instructions in ICQs. So here you actually have to write what you're going to say. So for my instructions would be, take a look at the pictures and try to memorize them in 30 seconds. Now, turn the pictures down. Take turns. One student selects 2 pictures and turn them up. If both pictures show the same animal, collect the pictures. If the pictures show different animals, put the pictures back. So whoever has more correct pairs at the end wins. Then you have to write the ICQs you're going to use. Remember, the ICQs are the questions you use to check understanding of the instructions. So for instance, can you turn more than 2 pictures if you don't get it right the first time? Remember to write the answer. No. What do you have to do if you collect a pair? Keep the cards. What do you have to do if you turn two different pictures? Put them back, etc., etc., etc. And then you can consider how you will take feedback and provide error correction to students. So you can do something like provide on the spot error correction if students mispronounce the names of animals. Then, the next column is the interaction pattern. Here you have to consider the core of the activity. In this case, it is pair work, PW. It could be individual work, group work, teacher-students, but this is not the case here, so we only write PW, pair work. The next column is for the number of minutes you plan to spend on this activity. So let's say 5 minutes. And last but not least, you have to consider problems and solutions in relation to classroom management, procedures, learners, and materials. For instance, problem 1. There might be a trio of students. Problem 2. There might be a picture missing in the set. Problem 3. There might be fast finishers. And then you have to think of the solutions. What happens if there is a trio of students? Set separate instructions for the trio. What happens if there is a picture missing in the set? Provide an extra set of pictures. What happens if you have fast finishers? You can provide some more pictures for the fast finishers, etc., etc., etc. Here you can anticipate as many problems as possible. The more, the merrier. The last column is for your tutor to write the comments on the lesson, so there is nothing for you to write there. You will do this for all of the stages. Next, we have the board plan. The board plan is for you to think of what you're going to write on the board, but this is not a description of the board. You actually have to plan the board the way you would do this in the lesson. Some people prefer to do this by hand on a piece of paper and take a picture. You can do this using your computer if you want to. And the last thing is called the TP feedback report. This is where your tutor will write the information on the lesson. So the tutor will write the strengths of the lesson, suggestions for improvement in terms of planning and resources, and in terms of lesson execution, language awareness, and professionalism. And here at the end is where the tutor will register whether the lesson was too standard or not too standard. Remember that you have to send the lesson plan by email to your tutors. You will need to print out a copy of this to use in class, but everything that you send to your tutor will be done electronically because later this will be uploaded on Fronter.